It's only entertainment.
Welcome back to the Talking Hedge. I'm Josh Kincaid, capital markets analyst and host of your Cannabis Business Podcast. Today we got George Jage, CEO of Jage Media and producers of MJ Unpacked. George, thanks for being with us at the Talking Hedge.
Josh, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here today.
Appreciate it. George, you founded, you were the former president of MJBizDaily, MJBizCon, previous CEO of Dope Media, and then you launched Jage Media earlier this year, in 2020, September, I believe. You had a veteran team, cannabis investors, including BDSA Analytics, CanopyBoulder, Panther Opportunity Fund, who I find interesting because they just pop up out of nowhere, those guys at Panther. And many other cannabis industry veterans. But what drove you to start Jage Media?
So actually, we started this in September of 2019. When I was running MJBizCon and took over, and they were a small kind of startup publication in the space, and there was kind of this idea that cannabis was really going to be legal finally once and for all. It was really a great opportunity, and really from that 2014 to 2017 period that I ran that company and scaled them up into a 1,000+ booth show at the Las Vegas Convention Center. The industry needed software, they needed equipment, they needed technology, they needed the machine in the corner that goes bing, as I like to say, for those Monty Python fans out there. Really it was about how do we get the tools and technologies to stand up these licensed operators. But what I also knew is that was far from being the end game, right? The end game in our industry, we're a consumer packaged goods industry. And in every single consumer packaged goods industry, the biggest and most important trade event is built around brands and retailers. And the only reason that we don't have a national CPG show for the cannabis industry is because we don't have a national CPG market yet, but we're going to. So, I always believed that this show existed in the future. It was just a question of who was going to steward and manifest it. So we started the business based on the idea that we could kind of, play to where the puck was going and actually do a series of state-focused events exclusively for cannabis brand and retail executives. And that's always been kind of one of the challenges of this industry, is that because it's so new, you don't know who's in the industry, who's legitimately, operating the space. Mm-hmm. A lot of shows go to early stage markets where it's like $20 for somebody to get in, and it's just the can of curious come out of the woodworks. And there's a very low return on objectives to events like that, or events that are even large that are kind of pan-industry approach, where it's everybody and anybody who wants to come in into the space. So we really felt that there was a much higher, value proposition to kind of creating an event exclusively for what we consider the vanguard of our industry, right? These licensed operators, it's the retail operators that are creating the experience for, consumers to come in and shop cannabis products, and the brands to be able to create the trust and transparency and the product safety and efficacy to engage them in the category, and the cultivators too. Obviously, once you put a label on that flower and put it in a jar, it's a consumer packaged goods. But even upstream, the cultivators that are providing, the bulk materials that eventually get turned into edibles or consumables in some way, shape, or form, all part of that ecosystem. But they're the ones on the front line that are winning over the consumers in our market. They're the ones that are going to make our industry grow. And we see them as the most important subsegment of the industry. And so we started the company with that intention and raised a bunch of money in February of 2020. And guess what? Events got canceled in March. So
I want to get to the capital raise. I also want to get to the pandemic and how that shifted everything. But it is interesting to see you kind of readdressing trade shows, because for a while there we saw OG trade shows like CannaCon turn into dirt shows, where it was mostly fertilizer, picks, shovels, buckets, and then the general public walking around going, "Oh, this is great, I get all this free fertilizer," and it's the rest of us in the industry are going, what is this shit show? What happened to a good trade show? You have 28 years of trade show leadership experience. You were named Tradeshow Elite by Tradeshow Executive and also named Next Generation of Leaders by Tradeshow Week Magazine. George, what's the secret to having so many previous events recognized as the fastest growing show in the US?
I think one of the things I've just been very fortunate that I have been able to be in that leadership position for some very early stage events. The first one, getting out of college, and my dad's business needed some help. He was a apparel liquidator. They call them jobbers in the space, where they would liquidate end-of-season goods, distressed assets. And he was having some challenges, but we also lost the space that we had in Las Vegas that was kind of on the fringe of the big manufacturer show. So we created a trade show for the off-price apparel community. And that's really where I fell in love with the opportunity to kind of, create these events, create this excitement, but really drive transactional success for these companies. And moving forward through my career, it's just, working in those early stage markets, but also really being embedded and really taking the time to understand and listen to those markets. When we launched World Tea Expo, I didn't know anything about tea, but I learned it. And I wasn't trying to do a show for tea, and then next week I'm doing a show for, apparel. And the week after that, I'm doing one for bolts and fasteners, right? So some of the big trade show conglomerates, they kind of create these cookie cutter models saying, okay, partner with the association, send out a bunch of emails, and they'll show up and sell booth space, right? Like when we ran the World Tea Expo, we created the first ever tea auction on U.S. soil and got the Guinness Book of World Records for the price paid for a chest of black tea. I was the first person to bring somebody from the Urasenki Foundation, a Grand Master from the Urasenki Foundation, to do a Japanese tea ceremony in the United States. So we look at ways that can really create cool engagements. We created this whole tea and beverage competition where people were making alcohol-infused tea libations. I was a judge for that competition, which was a little bit harrowing later in the day, but it's just really trying to find, where are those sweet spots where you can do something that people wouldn't think of or haven't seen before, or can really inspire and excite an audience and stay focused to that community.
Yeah, I think there's something to be said about a customer experience, whether it's a restaurant or an event. People aren't going to necessarily go back unless there's that experience, right? And so I've lived in Japan, and the whole coffee and tea making experience is a ritual. And so kind of like cannabis in a way, maybe like if someone saw a dabber, they'd be like, well, that is one interesting ritual. But I think it's the customer experience that's going to bring people back time and time again. You ended up launching the first MJ Unpacked Summit on June 5th, 2020 in downtown Denver.
Didn't. We actually planned on launching that first one in Denver.
Oh.
When the pandemic hit, you probably dug up an old press release that we sent out saying that we were launching it. And
yep.
But we were faced with a situation, in March that events are going to be canceled indefinitely, and we didn't really understand the full kind of impacts of the pandemic at that time, and how long it was going to be, and how painful it was going to be economically. But the great part about kind of being the dumbest guy to raise money for an events company right before a pandemic is that we didn't lose 90 to 100% of our revenues from the last year. I didn't have to, because I didn't have any. I didn't have to go back to my customers and say, I'm keeping your money because we can't afford to give it back. I didn't have to, unpack, contracts with vendors and everything else. We immediately shifted and said, how can we be of service? And so we actually launched the very first virtual trade show for the cannabis industry in May of 2020 for the Colorado market, kind of aligned with what we were planning on doing with the live event. And I think it was fantastic. I mean, virtual events as a whole were very difficult. It's hard to try to replace the value of face-to-face interactions in a digital screen. And it was certainly the weirdest moment of my trade show career. We opened that show up, the day it's open, I'm like, all right, open the doors. And you see people coming in the room, but I'm sitting in my office by myself in total silence. And going, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to behave. I'm used to the doors open, there's this big fanfare, excitement. Everybody's looking around, wants to go, find out where they need to go. The conversations are starting. You see people doing business together. I see friends hugging each other, and it's like I'm in this room by myself in silence. It was creepy. And so anyways, we did 3 virtual events last year. We did one for the California market. We pushed that back a little bit with some of the looting that happened in California that affected a lot of retailers. And then we did one for the Midwest markets, trying to kind of bring together the Michigan, Illinois, Missouri markets, and even Oklahoma. We learned a lot. We engaged with a lot of people. I think we provided a lot of value at a time when people were just desperately trying to connect with other people. But I'm glad that that's over.
Well, what was it like though? I mean, walk me through how you were able to kind of successfully pivot to stay relevant. You tried to open and launch an event. But I mean, you did essentially launch your company and the event, whether it was in person or not, and you had a publishing arm, and you did it all during the pandemic. Right. Like, how did you manage to pivot to stay relevant?
Yeah. So when we started looking at like, how are we going to do a digital, virtual event? And listen, I've been in the trade show industry for a long time. And I remember back in the late 90s, early 2000s, when virtual trade shows came around, and there was a lot of people in the trade show industry going, the sky is falling. We're never going to be in business again. This is going to disrupt our industry, which it didn't. You got to kind of look at the basal, need for human interaction. We're animals, and it's in our DNA that we need to be around other people in a social environment. Mm-hmm. We looked at a lot of different opportunities out there. What I realized is, what are we good at is really building those connections, those relationships. I found a great partner that was able to create this. They already did virtual events for other industries in the medical community. And we were able to take their technology and their team without having to, scale up and double our staff to do an event that was going to, do 10% of the projected revenue of a normal event. And so everybody that came on board, we created these booths for them where they can completely customize them. So they could take a picture of themselves with their smartphone, and we could actually create that as an avatar in their booth, so that person would be standing in their booth, right? Like, we wanted to really personalize the experience. But they could take pictures of their products, and we could put those products in the booth, and then you could flip around and you could walk to the booths. They have videos that they could play from their booths. So you could click a little TV screen and kind of move around the space. But it was kind of hard. And then there was a whole chat functionality. Like, you could look at everybody that was in the room. You could see their name. You could click on it and start a conversation with them. And there were people I was talking to that was like, I've got 14 conversations going on with, 15 different people right now, and they were having a blast. Mm-hmm. But once that novelty of that wears off, people get distracted when they're sitting at home. Their dog needs to go for a walk. It's, their kids got to get picked up from school. Their boss is emailing them. And so that ability to kind of have a captive audience, like when you go to a convention center, you're there. When you go to a trade show, you're there, you're present. And you're on your computer screen. We are like societally like have ADD, right? Like,
George, how much of that is FOMO too? Like, people want to create FOMO by saying, hey, I'm at this event and you're not. With digital, anyone could be there. And so there's not as much sharing or maybe the need or want to be there because it's not exclusive.
Well, we still made our event exclusive. We still qualify.
Well, I'm just talking about in general, when you see on social media, people are posting stuff and saying, hey, I'm at this event. And I'm just wondering if everyone can be there and you don't have that FOMO driving some folks to certain events, maybe that's the behavioral change and why you're not getting flooded with tens or hundreds of thousands of attendees is because it's available to anybody.
I hear what you're saying, but and certainly that fear of missing out is something that we all kind of have in the back of our brains. But people who market based on the fear of missing out, saying that, look who else is going to be here. We always kind of took the approach that we'd rather sell on value, right? Like, we want to create a tremendous value proposition for people that makes it difficult for them to not want to be there. Not like, oh, you're going to miss out. So, I'm not a big fan of playing on and preying on fear. I mean, we've done that enough in our political environment for the last couple of decades, and in society of playing the fear element. And I just don't think it's good for society or people in general, or even a company, to kind of message themselves around that fear. But going back to like that virtual event experience, I mean, there was companies like Microsoft and Amazon that, went from having a 20,000 person live event to having 250,000 people attend their virtual events. Mm-hmm. And for those types of products in the technology space, there was probably those hundreds of thousands of people that wouldn't otherwise get on a plane, go to the event in Las Vegas, pay the money, get approved by their corporations to incur those travel expenses. They were less supervised. They were at home. They were expected to manage their own time. And they found a lot of value in going to those events. Again, cannabis And you gotta, gets back to why I love just not trying to be like somebody that's producing a bunch of events randomly for a bunch of industries, but really embed and compassionately drive an industry forward. Is that, I know that the cannabis industry is very social. And the same way in the tea industry, tea can be very social. It can be very communal in that sense, where people sit down and have a tea. It can also be very meditative, where people are sitting having a cup of tea to reflect on their thoughts. And cannabis is a lot like that too. People want to, kind of get inside their own head while they're using cannabis. People also want to share that with other people and have a kind of a group experience with it.
What did early cannabis trade shows look like by comparison? I kind of mentioned that some back in the day were dirt shows or shit shows because they didn't add value like you mentioned, or the experience that I mentioned earlier. There's a lot of pay to play events still. And when I go to them, I'm frustrated because if I go to an event and I want to see the secrets of financial raises, capital raises, and they're talking about a credit card advance and a family round or a convertible note, that's really annoying. So when they're just going to sell spots, that's not adding value. Can you talk to us maybe a little bit about what early trade shows were like by comparison, what you're doing to make your next event unique?
Yeah. So when I got into the space in 2014, there was 2 other events in the market. One was CannaCon that you mentioned, was launched up here in the Seattle area where I live. And that first event was literally cement floors with, tables, undraped tables, and people just kind of setting up at these tables and kind of walking through. And, word on the street was that the organizer, left the facility owing them 30 grand and stiffed them on it. Right. Whether that's true or not, that was just what I heard. The other one was NCIA had started a show. They had a strategic partnership with MJBizDaily at that time to partner with them in their show. They wanted to kind of move into kind of policy focused events and decided to create a trade show that looked and smelled and tasted a lot like what we were doing. And then the next year there was 10, and next year there was 30, right? And a lot of these events, like people said, hey, I'm gonna run an event. And what frustrated me was I saw all these people come out and say 30,000 people, over 500 exhibitors, right? And they've never done a show before. And honestly, they never had any experience doing shows for other industries. And it's the frustrating part isn't like watching them fail because they overpromised and underdelivered, was that they're creating an expectation and under-delivering on it to people who are going to lose that money from a marketing spend standpoint for the companies that exhibited. Mm-hmm. And the people who are attending that show are going to devalue the benefit of attending a trade event that's professionally and well run. Mm-hmm. Selling the stage is in my opinion, that's like those ad coupon books that you get in the mail. It's just all paid advertising, right? And there's not, those usually end up in the garbage for a reason. And so, we look at our content, our stage as really kind of our editorial content, and we keep a strict separation of church and state. Same way at MJBiz, they've done a good job of that as well. Really looking at how they can create the best conference program that delivers the highest value to the audience. And, what's unique about our event, because we're a hyper-focused event, we're bringing in some of the most amazing executives in our industry. It's executive level only. And when you're at that executive level in that C-suite, people tend to be more open and sharing, success stories, because they're not looking at us as competition. They're looking at it as we are in a collaborative space trying to grow an industry that we're all going to benefit from. So, we have a very high level program addressing some of the top pain points for brands and retailers in the space. And we're not trying to cover 42 different topics, and we're not going to have a session on how to open up a dispensary, because if they don't know how to open up a dispensary, they're not qualified to come to our show.
MJ Unpacked is going to be in person, exclusive to cannabis CPG brands, retailers, and accredited investors. This is going to be the first cannabis CPG trade event that's designed to both drive commerce and integrate access to capital. Maybe you can kind of explain at this point how the pandemic changed events for you. How did you kind of adjust or adapt to the pandemic?
I think we looked at the pandemic as an opportunity to kind of take a deep breath and really think through what creates success at an event, right? Like, what are the goals? What are the expectations? And I've always approached trade shows kind of with this 3-pillar approach of return on investment, return on objectives, and return on experience, right? And so the return on investment needs to be the people who are investing in the show to take an exhibit space or a sponsorship. We need to make sure that we're connecting them with the right people that is going to create that return on investment that they're expecting from their marketing spend. The return on objectives is going to be for the attendees being able to get the information or meet with the potential partners that they need to at the show. And the return on experience is just obviously creating an event environment that's friendly, right? Like we view this as our house. We're inviting you into our home, albeit a temporary facility that we're renting from somebody else, but making sure that you feel like people are treated the same way we want to be treated. Like, what are the things we like about shows? What are the things we don't like? We talked to over 300 brand and retail and investor executives in the space, and we asked them, a series of questions about what they liked and didn't like. We asked them, did they go to Las Vegas in 2019? And if so, did they go to MJBizCon or were they just there in town? More than half said that they didn't go to MJBizCon. They were just there to schedule other meetings. And about 40% of them said they spent less than an hour on the floor at MJBizCon because at this point, like they're not looking for light bulbs and label makers. They're looking for, the ability to sit down and have a conversation with a potential partner or an acquisition target, or, maybe a strategic licensee in a new state. So we looked and really evaluated what are the need sets and what is the experience we want to create. So the first thing that we did is that we know that people do business with people, not companies. So we need to give a lot of space for people to be able to find a corner to sit down and have a conversation. And if the right people are in the room, 3 out of 5 people you bump into are somebody you want to have a conversation to instead of trying to find that 1 out of 500. So we really wanted to kind of, make this about quality, not quantity. Not about transactional that we want to sell another booth or another registration ticket, but we want to understand what the companies are trying to do at our show and make sure that we are vested in their success path. And so we created this huge lounge area. It's really cool. I've got soft seating throughout it. I've got a foosball table that 16 people can play foosball on at the same time. I've got a stage where local musicians are coming in. There's going to be a bar set up and it will be open at 10 a.m. So if you need a Bloody Mary, we're not going to judge you. It is Las Vegas. I'm still working on getting an oxygen bar in there and possibly even somebody that can do an IV drip because, again, it is Vegas. We have a huge kind of area of investor suites where like Poseidon and Panther Capital and Entourage Effect, Arcadian, Trailhead, Kenny Ventures, and some others are setting up instead of having a suite, at a random hotel and people wasting their time in a cab line and a hotel elevator. They're right there on the show floor. They can go walk out the room and have access to deal flow. And yet they have the privacy that they need to be able to meet with their investors or portfolio companies, or maybe just an individual one-to-one to discuss an investment opportunity. We have a money stage. This is more like a Benzinga or a Sidoti or a Roth conference. It's something I created in the cannabis space for another company back in 2019 called MJ Micro. But this is really an opportunity for companies that are looking to do that corporate presentation approach instead of just networking with investors and doing the follow-ups. And people are welcome to do both at our event. We got our main stage. And then, when we came to kind of the trade show floor and we didn't want to create a trade show floor. We realized that, for me to get a brand to participate and get brands from around the country to participate, we've got brands coming in from Colorado and California and Washington and Oregon and Nevada and Arizona and Missouri and Illinois and Michigan and Massachusetts, all from across the country to be on display. The idea of selling a $5,000 or $6,000 booth that is a price for a 10 by 10 at all the national shows, and then having to spend just as much, if not more, to build that booth, ship it out there, set it up, and store it. We want to create a really easy price point and a low barrier of entry for them. So we created these brand showcases that are, it's a 7-foot tower, 4 shelves, company's logo on all 4 sides, but we tech enabled them. So there's a QR code on every one of those. So when attendees come to our show, they can scan that QR code, they can download and view the information about the company and the brands. And then they can direct message a brand rep and say, I'm standing in front of your case. I'd really like to talk to you. Or they can schedule time on their calendar and ask to meet with them sometime later during the show. So it creates all of that connectivity and that lead gen that the brand would expect from having a booth, but they don't have to stand in their booth. They can move around the event. They can go and hunt for themselves. And so, that's been very well received in the industry. We've got a ton of amazing brands. They love the idea. It's a low lift. It's an easy point of entry for them. And the price points, about the same as it would cost them just to attend some of these national events with the prices they charge.
Yeah, that's a huge value because when you go to something like an MJBizCon, a national event, you're going to have people at a booth, and you can't access them. There might not be a business card, and that's missed opportunity. So I think that's a great advantage to offer that, where you can just grab that QR code and contact them at a later date.
Yeah, well, once you scan that QR code, that brand's going to have the information that you scan their QR code, and they can follow up with you too. So it still creates that lead generation for the brands. But what's really exciting about this is it creates really kind of a retail discovery experience, as I like to say, on our show floor. And again, this is the first show ever that will have brands from around the entire country on display in a single location to really see where the innovation is, who's winning, what the market's going to look like. And really give some vision to our industry of shaping it into a national CPG industry. We have a huge meeting space on the floor. I've got, I'm bringing a gong from China that's called the Flower of Life gong that uses sacred geometry that's got 7 concentric circles, which ties in nice with the marijuana leaf, that people can bang when they get a deal done. Bang Chocolate sponsoring the gong. Thanks, Bang. And we wanted to create kind of this very kind of easy touch opportunity. We do have traditional booths. We have some larger 20 by 20 booths. They're all turnkey, so the exhibitors really just need to send graphics and who's coming and show up and set up and go to town. And we just have a lot of very kind of exciting things on our show floor that I think people will enjoy the kind of discovery process for.
So it's a little bit different of a model. You're trying to make it easier for people to attend while still kind of pricing it the same way. So MJ Unpacked being October 21st to the 22nd at Mandalay Bay in Las Vegas is for like retailers, investors, brands. For retailers, attendees are going to gain specialized insights, have access to capital, collaborate with other retailers across the country. Free for retailers, by the way. So dispensary license holders and their managing partner teams get in for free. But how would you explain this revenue model to investors?
The revenue model for our business, or the event for an investor wanting to come to the show?
No, for the business.
Yeah. So listen, typically on a trade show business, the kind of average price per square foot for trade show space is around $35 a square foot. Cannabis industry is obviously selling a lot of those shows at a premium. And typically you'll see somewhere around 50 to 60% of your revenues come from exhibit space sales, and you'll see 20-25% come from sponsorship sales, and the balance from attendee registration revenue. Now it depends on the show. Certainly different shows have a higher registration price, but the old model always used to be is a buyer should come in for free. Our value proposition is attracting as many of those buyers as possible. We want to make it as easy for them to decide to come as possible. But retailers are a very difficult business. They have a very difficult business to run. A lot of times they have a difficult time picking their head up and looking over the fence to see where the market's going. The opportunity for peer-to-peer learning, as you said, is phenomenal at our event. The opportunity to connect with capital and or maybe even an acquisition partner that might want to buy your business. We know that there's some big MSOs out there operating. So from a revenue standpoint and for our business, if I'm selling a brand showcase, so if I set up my exhibit hall floor, I'll probably end up with about a 40% utilization of space if I run just typical bowling lane alleys of exhibit space throughout this, right? So I've got 100,000 square feet. I'm probably going to get 40,000 square feet of exhibit space, and say I sell that at $40 a square foot, $1.6 million in sales. And that's really the kind of the bread and butter of what drives the economic engine for a business like a typical trade show. Now, by me offering these brand showcases, my footprint is, basically, 2 feet by 2 feet. And I have this brand showcase that I'm generating $22 for that 4 square feet of space. So, my yield on my space by having these brand showcases is actually better than a traditional trade show because of the fact that, I'm optimizing the package that I'm delivering to the customer to buy exactly what they need, and not trying to sell them this real estate package of 100 square feet at a block.
Mm-hmm. Moving on to investors, talked about retailers. So with MJ Unpacked, and in terms of the investors, it's the first CPG trade event that's designed for both to drive commerce and integrate access to capital. Where is the appetite for cannabis investing, or where have you seen or heard deal flow being concentrated?
Yeah, I think when we were looking at the industry in those early years, 2012 maybe to 2018, I think most of the venture capital that was coming into the space was set up specifically to invest in cannabis because the mainstream VCs weren't doing it, or they maybe, family office spun off a small chunk of its fund to, make investments in the space. But the appetite was really for the picks and shovels, right? Like everybody's like, you don't want to be mining for gold. You want to be selling the guys mining for gold, picks and shovels. But now that we're really starting, the momentum we have behind us right now. Alcohol was a $250 billion industry in 2019, and there's no reason that cannabis can't get to that level. And we're at what, 20, 25, maybe 30 billion, depending on whose data you look at right now. So we're still in the very infancy of this market. And when you look at after prohibition, alcohol prohibition ended, that was the birthing of some of the greatest generational wealth that we've probably seen in that generation for the Seagrams and the Bacardis and the Anheuser-Busch families, Jose Cuervo's family, et cetera, that built these empires and these massive, companies that, some of the wealthiest privately held companies in the world, in some cases. So we're at the birthing of those companies happening in cannabis. And where I see the smart money going today is actually investing into the licensed operator because of the huge opportunity for valuation growth. Now, Alan Brockstein, good friend of mine who publishes New Cannabis Ventures, has been talking about that, most of these publicly traded cannabis stocks have been fairly flat, if not depressed, since, highs back in February or March. But, it's not based in any real factual, basis. There's no technical or fundamental basis to those valuations. So you look, first of all, if we see this passage of safe banking, that's going to be a huge valuation jump. You're eliminating a significant amount of risk by a cash operated business. You're providing access to traditional banking solutions. So instead of having to raise money for your operating costs, you can actually maybe get lines of credit. We're already starting to see some companies that offer those products in the market. They'll be at our show as well. And you're going to see a valuation jump. 280E could potentially return $20 or $30 billion in capital in our industry by some estimates. That might take a little while to pry the government off of their meaty hooks of grabbing people's money. But, the 280E tax law obviously doesn't allow a federally illegal business to deduct normal business expenses. So they're paying taxes on their gross margin, which can result in a 60, 70, maybe even 100% marginal tax rates for these businesses. So that's going to be another huge valuation jump for these companies. If we start seeing interstate commerce pacts, which is certainly plausible and precedented in other industries that are heavily regulated, that's going to be another huge valuation jump. Federal legalization is going to be a huge valuation jump for these businesses, which is in reach. The light at the end of the tunnel is not a train coming at us anymore. It's actually a path to providence. And I think the biggest valuation jump that we're going to see in the cannabis industry is the development of a true on-premise market. In alcohol sales, I mentioned that $250 billion, I think it was around 43 or 46% of it was on-premise consumption. So creating products, and we're already seeing these products created with this nano emulsification, delivery system. So the absorption is happening further upstream, not going through your stomach and liver. So you have a quicker uptime and a shorter intoxication profile than you would if you took a traditional edible. And having products like Can or Viv and Oak or other companies that are coming out with these beverage products, I believe that in 3, maybe 2 years, I can go to a bar that is a cannabis bar and order a Granddaddy Purple and Coke, or I can go get a Can seltzer or one of these products. And now I can have multiple consumption instances over the course of a night. And if I get too intoxicated, guess what? I'm not going to have a hangover in the morning. Like, people are becoming more aware of the significant parity between the social and physiological harm of cannabis versus alcohol. And if we can kind of get that holy grail of kind of meeting the moment, as I always like to say, of offering an experience that has already been embedded in our society for the last 100, 150 years, or millennia for that matter, of going and having libations, but have them be, have that intoxicant be cannabis and THC, not alcohol, ethanol.
There's a lot of opportunities there. I think with that cross-border, Oregon already passed that law that's going to allow for beverage companies that is probably the most expensive with the smallest margins. And you're in Seattle, and there's not even a infused coffee, like a grab and go RTD, ready to drink coffee. There's K cups, but that's not coffee. So there needs to be some more opportunities there. 280E, like you mentioned, would allow a lot of these underperforming cannabis companies to really have an increase in their margins by being able to write off that employee expense. So once 280E is allowed, bam, off to the races. And shameless plug, I just wrote an article for Benzinga about the underperformance of cannabis stocks. It's called Sin Stocks or Vice Stocks, a Sin Not to Have in Your Portfolio. And it talks about the shunned stock hypothesis, where a lot of investors that are interested in ESG and SRI stay away from cannabis stocks, which causes a artificial suppression of their value. And so once that kind of goes away, those stocks go up. So in times of economic depression, recession, corrections, cannabis stocks do well because they're already underperforming. So they're going to be looking for those asset classes that go up. And so naturally that's going to happen. But
you probably know better than I do, but I imagine that cannabis stocks have had a negative beta since day one.
Yeah, except for in November with the elections. And then in January, we saw a huge increase. But like you mentioned, with Alan Brockstein, they have been negative. There's been a massive retracement, maybe 60% retracement since January. So I think there's some opportunities, especially leading into this asset allocation from September to December, when a lot of these fund managers reallocate their portfolios, could mean that, towards the end of the year, beginning of 2022, we see a nice little pop in stocks.
We're going to New York with our next MJ Unpacked in May of 2022. We'll be in the Midtown Manhattan area.
Nice.
This is a huge opportunity a lot of the institutional investors, they're paying attention.
Mm-hmm.
Big CPG companies, they're sneaking around at the shows, kind of in the shadows.
Mm-hmm.
And I think most of us in cannabis have known, probably since the 1960s, Marlboro already had its packaging design and layout for their cannabis cigarettes at some point, right?
Mm-hmm.
We call them joints. But the opportunity there for these big companies to come in and roll it out is huge. When you talk about the cannabis beverage category, you look at what Space Station's doing out in California, but you got to look at that huge capital cost, right? Like the amount of equipment and machinery that is required to create a bottling facility, to be able to retool that for all the various products that are coming through as kind of a true bottling house. And obviously then the transportation costs on product goes significantly higher because of the liquid weight.
Mm-hmm.
But this is, I think, going to be a function of interstate commerce and or federal legalization, because the idea of building out these types of bottling facilities in every single state market is going to be a little overwhelming from a
There's no way.
Yeah.
Coca-Cola doesn't do that. They have their regional facilities, right? There's no way they would be able to copy and paste those SOPs and all of the equipment in all the states. It would never happen.
Sure, but what also they do is they manufacture the syrup, right? And so they manufacture the syrup as a very highly concentrated product, ship the syrup out to those kind of endpoint distribution hubs,
Mm-hmm.
and then they rehydrate it and reverse dilute it, so to speak, to put into the packaging at those locations with a shorter transportation hub, right?
Yeah, well, let me ask you about preference when it comes to products like beverages. Do brands even matter? So MJ Unpacked, you're also about brands. MJ Unpacked is going to anticipate 100 THC CPG brands and products plus 2,000 retailers. Jage Media also launched MJ Brand Insights in September 2020, dedicated to providing a sharp, substantive, reliable source of industry intel for cannabis brands and retailers. And you can
so much better than I do.
And you can accelerate sustainable growth by fostering enlightened peer-to-peer collaboration. But do brands matter, George? Is it still all about the highest THC at the lowest price?
Well, we've done some coverage on that on MJ Brand Insights. I just did a quick hits with BDSA. We talked about the stoner category. There's certainly, I think, has been this kind of pursuit for the Chardonnay mom or soccer dad, and kind of creating opportunities to develop products that kind of meet this category of potential future consumers. And I think, heavily, possibly, fairly significant revenue opportunities. But, the heavier cannabis consumer, which most of the consumers are consuming, once daily or, at least, 3 to 4 times a week. their basket size is much higher. And yeah, they are probably in a lot of cases some are looking for the highest THC product at the lowest cost. Again, look at alcohol prohibition. I mean, it was, what was selling out the door the fastest was probably moonshine, right? But eventually people realized that there was a sophistication to this, and that there was quality products and premium products and local products that they might want to shop for. But when you look at brands, what's kind of unusual, I think, about the cannabis industry is that the relationship with the consumer almost exclusively lies with the retailer. And there's certainly case studies for this in other markets, like where Whole Foods as a retailer kind of owns the relationship with their customers, right? And you're coming to Whole Foods based on an experience and a belief that they're going to have higher quality produce, and you can see it and you can taste it and you can feel it. And so that brand promise gets delivered for Whole Foods as a retail outlet. But as a CPG industry, much more like alcohol, I mean, we're going to see that relationship live with the products and the brands, where I'm going to be able to go to a store and I can order a Jack and Coke, or I might want to have a Georgetown Bodhisattva, which is one of my favorite beers. It's a nice IPA from a local brewery here. And I'm not going to care which retail location I'm at. I'm going to care what product I'm buying, right? Based on my personal preference. And especially like in the California market, I mean, like the retailers are like the hyper apex predator out there, because they can choose from, 20 different gummies that they can carry in their store. So which one of those edible companies and gummy companies are going to do the most for the retailer? Are they going to cross promote them? Are they going to pay slotting fees? That will change. This is a CPG industry, no doubt.
What do you think cannabis brands need right now? I mean, right now you could be a Larry's Handy Mart in a world of 7-Elevens if you don't have an exit strategy. So for a lot of companies, whether it's a retailer or a farmer thinking that he's going to be able to grow millions of dollars growing hemp, there's a lot of altruism and people not paying themselves, staying in this industry for whatever reason, thinking that they're going to have a legacy when they probably don't have enough capital to even advertise. What do you think cannabis brands need right now?
I think the biggest thing is for them to be able to, start building that relationship with the consumer is going to be fair and unfettered access to media opportunities, right? Like, I mean, they are so restricted and every state's got their own policies, some very draconian, but they're constantly being booted from Instagram and Facebook, and they use those as their primary tools to build a fan following. Some states do allow billboards. Certainly you see a lot in the Nevada market when you go there to Las Vegas in October. And companies like Weedmaps have certainly helped pioneer that space, because they've had the budget to, run billboard advertising campaigns in a lot of state markets. But I think that, television, radio, and all these other media assets that are restricted to cannabis companies promoting their product has created that bias towards the retailer. So, and I think then also the other thing for the brands need is to be able to have some type of, increase in their serviceable market, which is a function of interstate commerce and or federal legalization. And so somebody who is, manufacturing up here in Washington, has a limit on how much they can produce. So they can only sell probably to a kind of a small geographic area before they are, kicked out of that market. I think that being able to have access to mainstream media markets, and I think it was Acreage did a Super Bowl commercial a few years ago, and they did a great job. They knew that they didn't want to pay the $1 million or $2 million for the spot probably, but what they did is they submitted it just so it'd get denied, and then they could create this whole kind of social media campaign around, here's the Super Bowl ad you won't see. Mm-hmm. It was fantastic. I thought they did it was clever. It was brilliant. It was strategic. It was on point. And I'd like to see more of that. I'd like to see people being able to, sample at trade shows in every state, not just California. I think, opportunities for, kind of, without sounding sexist, but like, the bars would send the Bud Light girls, and they would be there and be handing out free swag and everything else. Cannabis companies, should be able to go and do, in-store demos and hand out product samples to qualified, adult use consumers.
Or at least display it. Right now, they can't even display it.
Right.
So that's an issue. I'm going to give you a 3-part question here. Leave it closer to the end to give you multiple questions. Social equity. MJ Unpacked, you guys announced a panel addressing social justice in the cannabis industry. So I want to know, what have you done to make structural changes for criminal justice? And then a follow-up, when do you anticipate federal legalization? What is that going to do to the industry?
Wow, those are 2 power-packed questions. So first of all, like when we did our virtual trade shows, we did a panel discussion on diversity, equity, and inclusion. We thought that was important and everything else. But we also realized that everybody's doing these DEI panels. That's not the solution. What we did is, after we did the first one, we said, we're not doing another one. What we're going to do is make sure that we have underrepresented voices in every section of our discussion. So in every panel and every place that we can, we want to make sure that the underrepresented voices of our industry have a seat at the table. We're not trying to create highlight the problem. We want to be a part of the solution. So for our event that we're doing in Las Vegas, this is really important to our organization. First of all, I've got a strategic partnership that we just created with our academy. They are a social equity and BIPOC-owned business accelerator out of the San Francisco Bay Area, run by Hillary Yu. She's doing a phenomenal job. We've got a equity scholarship that we're getting support so that some of the people that have graduated her cohort, and she's taking these companies and these BIPOC-owned businesses and saying, here's your dream. I'm going to help you transform your dream into a business plan, into a pitch deck. I'm going to teach you how to talk to investors, and I'm going to help you with your go-to-market strategy, right? And those are all of the precursor things for them to be able to launch their business successfully. And we fit perfectly on the back end of that train, where we can actually connect them with investors, and we can actually help them launch their product in the market at our event. So we've got a section of our floor plan where our academy has a booth to help engage people and understand what they're doing. And then 6 of their cohorts are going to have brand showcases on our show floor. And then we have a dedicated hour pitch session on our money stage, where some of her cohort graduates are going to be able to pitch and raise capital, but they'll have access to capital throughout the whole event. MCBA, Minority Cannabis Business Association, which has done a phenomenal job bringing awareness to the issues that need to be fixed, is hosting a summit of their own at our event on Wednesday, the day before our event opens. They also have a booth on our show floor that we want to make sure they had in a prominent location, and some of their member companies will be on display next to their booth. The last thing, as far as criminal justice reform, and I just had a chat with Steve D'Angelo yesterday, but we're not really going to have a legal industry until we get the people who are incarcerated for cannabis and nonviolent cannabis crimes, selling, distributing. I don't care if it was 2 grams or 200 pounds, it's a plant and nobody was hurt in that transaction, and we should get those people out of jail. And Last Prisoner Project has certainly been the one organization that our industry has rallied around. So we've brought in the Blues Brothers, the legendary Blues Brothers, Jim Belushi and Dan Aykroyd. They're going to be doing a live benefit concert at the House of Blues at the Mandalay Bay, exclusively for the attendees of our event. It's exclusive. It is a separate ticketed event, and we're donating 100% of net proceeds to Last Prisoner Project. We've got some other things that we're doing, auctioning off on our show floor that's directly benefiting Last Prisoner Project. And we're going to be raising money at the benefit event and during our event. My hopes is that we may raise as much as $250,000 for LPP. And they're not just, helping with legal fees to get people out of jail. They're helping rehabilitate, their constituents. Almost all of them need medical care or dental care when they get out of prison. They need money for rent. They need clothes. They need help getting, finding a job, or, maybe getting on their feet and starting a business. Some of them have been very successful cannabis entrepreneurs post clemency. And they're doing really some amazing hero work. And we're really good at building an event and kind of being the PT Barnum of the circus and bringing everybody together. But I've always, made it a point and a priority for every event that we've done, to make sure that we have some type of, benefit event or something that we can also do good back into the community we're serving, because we're not in this for the short haul. If we don't support the community, I don't expect them to support us. So it's just, we see it as a moral obligation.
When do you anticipate federal legalization? I kind of asked that, assuming that will kind of change some stuff. Federal banking, one of those things. We kind of talk about SBA loans and social equity. I've been in banking and I never saw SBA help anybody. So anybody anticipating that banking and the SAFE Act or whatever else is going to help people, highly doubt it. But having said that, what is your anticipation for federal legalization and how do you think that's going to help the industry?
Well, I'm going to have to go get my crystal ball here. And Swami says, no, I'm hoping that this is something that we're going to see in this administration's term. I've talked to a lot of people in the industry. I mean, we are going to have an overwhelming majority of the senators and representatives in our Congress, regardless of party affiliation, that represent states that have legal cannabis, period. So this is the golden hour for us to get this through. It's complicated. I think that a big part of politics, unfortunately, because of Citizens United, is driven by corporate donations. And we're starting to see the scaling of some of the bigger players in our industry who have taken their responsibility seriously to help, hopefully move some of this legislation forward. But there's a lot of challenges there, right? Like some of the big MSOs don't want to see federal legalization because they want to have that ability to secure exclusive limited licenses in states that they have a competitive advantage of because of their operational efficiencies and their access to capital. I think on the short side, we're going to see it post midterm. On the long side, I hope that it happens during this current administration because I don't know what's going to happen in the 2024 elections, right? It's a scary world out there, and I'll leave it at that.
It is. Yeah, my crystal ball prediction is that whoever gets elected,
I want one of those.
Whoever gets elected or reelected, it'll happen right at the beginning of the next term. That's my prediction.
Yeah, and I certainly hope so.
Well, it will make it easier to raise capital, I think.
Democratic candidate then, is it Kamala Harris?
Harris? Right. Okay. That's my guess. Yeah. But I do think it'll make it easier for raising capital. You guys raised capital. I think you raised $750,000 in equity and convertible debt back in February 2020. I think you're still currently raising about $500,000 through a SAFE with 60% completed.
We just closed that actually.
Perfect.
We've completed our SAFE round, and that was really just to fill the tank back up. I mean, when we entered into 2020 with our original plans and raised the money on those original plans, we obviously changed them significantly, and the revenue opportunity for virtual events was very small. But we saw it as an opportunity to kind of build our relationships, our infrastructure, our team. So we really wanted to basically top off the gas tank. And listen, I mean, trade shows on scale can be very successful and profitable. We're not in this to kind of, again, for short-term gain. We want to be able to create our business success as a function of creating success for our clients, not the other way around. And that's going back to some of those other shit shows, as you referred to them with, is that people see an opportunity to create an event, sell a booth, sell a ticket, sell a booth, sell a ticket. If they don't take the time to understand their audience and how they can create true value, they're never going to be successful.
So you raise capital through a simple agreement for future equity or SAFE. So that was created as a way to replace a convertible note. That's just simply in exchange for cash, and the investors get the right to purchase stock at a future round. What are the use of funds? What are you going to use the funds for? And what are the biggest potential drivers for your revenue growth over the next couple of years?
So, the use of funds is basically for us to, operating capital and sales and marketing to build our show platform, right? We've got events planned out for 2022 and into 2023 now. So we've got to use some of that capital to secure future venues and other assets that we need in those future dates. The biggest revenue growth is going to be our events. Again, on scale, without kind of giving away the secret sauce, but once I cover my basic costs of, staffing, registration, and other fixed costs like the venue costs and everything else, my costs become very variable. And so as I sell more booth space, as we sell more registrations, a lot of that money falls to the bottom line once we kind of hit our minimum threshold. So the margins are really good there. But we're not trying to be the biggest. We want to be the best right now. And I think once we're the best, it gives us unlimited opportunity to be the biggest. So, we see the events being the primary, source of revenue growth. I've built a number of, integrated media assets as they're called, where you have print, digital, events. Events are going to be the ones that you make your money on. As far as the future growth opportunities, we've got a lot of very unique discussions going on, and the opportunity to kind of transform what we're doing, both as a trade show and saying, how do we make this more viable, more successful? How can we take those other related media assets, such as our digital publication, which is a pretty straight block and tackle, put up content, sell advertising. We haven't really pushed a lot of the advertising sales on there. We've given some great deals to our clients. It's really about, creating a place where we can connect with our community on a year-round basis. But we've got some really great ideas in the hopper right now that we see as huge growth potential, to serve the market in a much more robust way and meet the needs of the moment.
Little teaser there. We're going to have to stay tuned. Before we wrap this one up, though, I want to ask you about some acquisition, strategic partnership. So Jage, powerhouse in the cannabis industry, best known for business growth, specializing in cannabis, or business builder, adept at identifying new markets, opportunities to scale national businesses. Prior to founding Jage Media, George was chief executive officer at Dope Media, leading the 6-year-old startup to its acquisition by High Times. Can you kind of describe your tenure at Dope Magazine and how you set up your exit strategy that ultimately led to the acquisition by High Times?
Yeah, that's kind of one of those things that's, definitely a two-sided coin. So, it was an opportunity after I left MJBizCon that I really want to stay in the cannabis space. I had some legal issues I needed to resolve with the owners over at MJBiz. So I didn't want to necessarily drive right across their bow at the moment. I wanted to look at consumer media opportunities, and I've never really had the chance to build a consumer media asset before. So I was very excited about the challenge. The founders over there built an incredibly iconic brand. They had built a significant, base of revenue that they were able to kind of manifest on an annual basis with great growth. But it's a very difficult business model, and it was an oversaturated space. You got Mary Jane, you got High Times, you got Dope, you got Civilized, you got Cannabis Now. And I really don't think that there's been many that have been able to really create a successful, profitable consumer media asset in the cannabis space, probably with the exception of Cannabis Now. But and Sensi Magazine, there's another one, right? Like there's just a lot of redundancy and competition. And then once you kind of move that down, it's markets, because of the lack of federal legalization, really kind of hyper focus on the local markets. So you've got Vegas Cannabis Magazine, you've got Rooster, you see people advertising the alt weeklies. So you've got all that competition for the advertising dollars to really monetize that business. There was an opportunity, and part of, when I came on board at Dope was the idea. And at the time, there was a lot of companies going public on the Canadian Stock Exchange. There was a commitment of capital by a fairly well-known large investment group in Canada that was going to fund a big chunk of growth for Dope Magazine to expand nationally and for us to go get listed on the Canadian Stock Exchange. After I took the seat, that offer came in, and it had a lot of hooks, and it really wasn't a good deal for the founders or the investors. And I kind of had to balance the needs of both. As we moved on from that, I needed to raise capital, and it was very difficult to raise capital for a business that had not made a dollar profit in its 6 years of operating, success. While it had the revenue growth, it just, wasn't going to be able to get over that hump, right? If it hadn't already. We saw an opportunity that there was a number of publicly traded companies that were looking to acquire revenue streams that didn't necessarily have to be profitable. We had a deal done with a publicly traded company that I won't mention, that at the nth hour tried to retrade us, and those terms were very egregious. And High Times had a strong interest. So, knowing Adam, I went down and met with them and said, if you can do this, this, and this, we can sell you Dope Magazine. It was really just at the time the best path forward for the magazine. It was also, contingent Dope or High Times going public. Unfortunately, they've been saying they've been going public for the last 4 years. Not sure if that's ever going to happen at this point, but I think it was a great ride. And I think that the founders of Dope Magazine and the employees of Dope Magazine have a tremendous amount to be proud of what they created. And not all businesses live forever, and not all businesses need to live forever. But they made a very significant, impact in the industry. helped a lot of businesses and helped create a lot of consumer awareness that wouldn't have otherwise happened had it not been for the kind of grit and the hustle of that, that founding entrepreneurial team.
You've also had strategic partnerships. I think Apex Cannabis Marketplace, one of them. So Jage Media, they formed a strategic partnership with Apex Trading as a preferred wholesale ordering platform of MJ Unpacked. Distribution and access to products is critical. I've seen a lot of ex-athletes come in and open up, 24 stores in Bartels. It's kind of like a Rite Aid, Walgreens equivalent for those in other markets that don't know. So it's not just about having your product there. It's actually about marketing, advertising, distributing, getting access to your products. Very crucial for this industry, or any industry rather. Maybe you can describe your partnership with Apex and how you can anticipate utilizing their wholesale cannabis platform.
Yeah. And we have a strategic partnership you mentioned earlier with BDSA, and that was, based on that, launching a new event in the industry. I certainly know that I had some reputational equity, but that doesn't go very far, and that kind of stays in kind of closed circles. I wasn't the front face of MJ Biz. I was the wizard behind the curtain, pulling the levers to kind of really drive the strategy. That's a really important partnership for us because it gives us the credibility of having one of the biggest and most successful, marketing data and consumer insights firm behind us. And Apex Trading is the same way. Like, their ability to provide a, distribution and ordering platform for the wholesalers to, be able to reach the retailers is kind of that same sweet spot that we're targeting, right? Of connecting the brands and the retailers together and creating more operational efficiency. They're doing it through technology. We're doing it through live events. So we see an opportunity to really kind of help cross promote each other's businesses to the people that we're engaged with. And we certainly are exploring other opportunities to actually bring that technology and that live event experience together that can create, really a continuum around the year of the trade show experience and ordering experience, right? We also recently started a content partnership with Pioneer Intelligence. If you haven't had a chance to take a peek at what they're doing, they've created a comprehensive kind of data engine that looks at consumer engagement through three primary pillars of social media, website, and earned media, and provides a kind of proprietary ranking system to see which brands are trending up and gaining the most consumer awareness in any given market across any different category. And it's really fascinating data. And I think that type of stuff and being able to bring those tools together, and maybe as we continue to grow, finding ways that we can kind of really kind of almost create a single stop shop point for brands, for retailers to come in, get the data they need, be able to see the consumer insights they need, see the opportunities for, ordering efficiency they need, is certainly, I think, where we hope to go to.
Talked about a lot. Is there anything that we left out, or where people can find you at?
Well, they can certainly encourage you to visit mjbrandinsights.com and sign up to get our weekly email newsletter. Our managing editor, Felicia Rogers, is truly just an amazing journalist, and has done a phenomenal job really kind of, honing that content to be on point with our brand message. www.MJ Unpacked. I know when I say www, it makes me seem as old as Al Gore. But we certainly, would love to get anybody who is a CPG brand or retail executive with a title of manager or higher to sign up and attend our inaugural event in Las Vegas at the Mandalay Bay Hotel. And certainly accredited investors that are actively investing in cannabis space. And we really group that kind of active investors as people who can write a check, right? So, real estate investment trusts, they can write a check and provide access to capital to the licensed operators. Same thing with some of the new, emerging direct lenders that we see in the space that, build portfolios and are creating lines of credit for some of these operating companies. Is definitely an improvement to access to capital for our market.
All right, that's MJ Unpacked. That's October 21st and 22nd at Mandalay Bay Resort in Las Vegas. There's going to be Dan Aykroyd, Jim Belushi, Christy Hefner, Hugh Hefner's daughter, going to be keynote speakers. Like we said before, there's over 100 CPG brands, 2,000 retailers. There's going to be 11 conference sessions and panel discussions among industry leaders. There's investor pitches for companies that are seeking capital. You'll have exclusive mixers and for industry professionals. Blues Brothers Conference benefiting LPP that you mentioned for restorative justice and cannabis. All good things to go and promote and support.
Don't forget my gong.
Yes, and the Chinese gong. I might hit that without a deal. I might just have to do it anyways.
Listen, it's a natural energy healing gong, so feel free.
Yeah, count on it. All right, so I guess with that, we're going to roll this one up. I want to thank my guest, George Jage. He's CEO of Jage Media, producers of MJ Unpacked. George, thanks for being here with us at the Talking Hedge.
Josh, thank you so much. See you in
Appreciate
Las Vegas.
Absolutely. I'm Josh Kincaid. This is the Talking Hedge. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, or don't. And I'm out. Don't forget to smash that like button on your way out and check out these other videos that we've got.